Secretary Recto, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me.
The Philippines cut its growth target last year and through 2028, and that's because of the uncertainties at home as well as abroad. With the Trump administration coming back to power and the uncertainty about trade policies, how concerned are you about the Philippine economy?
Well, in the last 2 years of the Bongbong Marcos administration, we grew by 6%, one of the highest in the world. I think second in the world and second in the region. Southeast Asia is one of the fastest growing regions. So we grew by roughly 6%. Next year we expect to grow anywhere from 6 to 7%. And that's still a good growth rate, no? And that's because interest rates are still high, essentially. We've been able to cut interest rates by 75 basis points last year. We expect maybe another 50 basis points in 2025. That will help us grow to 6 to 6.5% next year, or in 2025. A Trump presidency, there is uncertainty on what he plans to do with regard to tariffs and inflation. Of course, if tariffs are imposed and inflation goes up, then interest rates will not go down as much as we want it to, right? So that would affect global growth, I suppose. No? But frankly speaking, it would appear that President Trump is a practical person. So he probably would increase tariffs on countries as leverage for immigration issues, I suppose. Or maybe with countries with high deficits, trade deficits. So the Philippines is not in that position.
So you don't think the Philippines is in a vulnerable position?
Only with regard to inflation and interest rates.
You talked about how...
But directly, not so much.
So pretty much your growth target is intact. There's no reason to rethink the target that you've set for the country.
That's correct.
You talked about the possibility of rate cuts, 50 perhaps in 2025.
That's correct.
Will you be front-loading that in the first half of the year? How are you looking at it?
Maybe about a quarter. 25 basis points per quarter, maybe 25 basis points the first half of the year, and another 25 the second half. More or less, we're looking at 75 basis points. But like I said, it all depends on tariffs and inflation.
When it comes to the outlook of the economy, what's the biggest risk, you think?
The biggest risk would be the global uncertainty, geopolitical tensions. But I think I'm very positive with the Trump presidency is there's now a ceasefire in the Middle East. And that should be good for oil prices. That should be good for commodity prices. Hopefully, we would be able to reduce all these uncertainties, global tensions, also in Europe and in Asia.
Trade is in focus, and some are concerned that perhaps Trump's tariffs on China may cause Chinese goods to be dumped in Southeast Asia, including the Philippines. We've already heard from Malaysia mulling anti-dumping measures. How are you looking at it? What's the possibility, and how concerned are you about it?
Today, we're not so much concerned. There are also opportunities for Western companies leaving maybe China and coming to the Philippines and to export to the United States, friendshoring, so on and so forth. So there are opportunities for the Philippines as well.
So you see that those measures might be more beneficial.
That's correct.
Than being negative for the Philippines.
That's correct. And the Philippines, the growth is really coming from household consumption, so from private consumption. About maybe 60-65% of our economy is household consumption. Unemployment rate is the lowest it's ever been. 50 million have better paying jobs in the Philippines. And that's where the growth is really coming from.
It really is against a backdrop of a mighty dollar. And some say that the Philippine peso may be weighed down further. In fact, Fitch is saying that perhaps the peso could breach 60 to the dollar. That's a possibility that even your governor has entertained.
Correct. The Philippines is in the middle of the pack, insofar as the depreciation of the currency is concerned. Japan has depreciated by 12%, Korea as well, more or less. The Philippines, more or less, we've depreciated by about 5% because the dollar is very strong, because interest rates have been going up, like I said earlier, right? But in the Philippines, we're not so much concerned about where the peso will be going. Let the market forces determine that, so we don't have really a number. We intervene in the market only if it's very volatile. just to flatten the curve, so to speak. So we're mindful of that, but I suppose we're okay.
So where the Philippine peso is right now, is that fair
Yes.
value? Is it undervalued? What's your own take? Is it a reflection of the state of the economy?
I think it's a reflection of, because of geopolitical uncertainty, and naturally there's a flight to safety, and that makes the U.S. dollar strong. It's not so much that the peso is weak, but it's the U.S. dollar that's very strong.
You've talked about how you might tap the global bond market this year.
Yes.
Euro as well as dollar
Yes.
denominated bonds.
Yes.
Where are you with that?
We're only looking at tapping something like $3.5 billion this year.
Is that euro or dollar?
Mostly
Denominated.
dollar. There will be euros, I suppose, but mostly dollar. Like I said, it's only roughly about $3.5 billion. 80% of our borrowing is domestic. There's a lot of domestic savings in the Philippines. There's a lot of liquidity. It's even cheaper for us to borrow domestically, frankly speaking. So we're not so much concerned.
When might you go to market?
First half of the year.
Have you engaged any banks? Where are you with it?
Yes, we've identified about 8 banks. And the Treasury now is working with them. And we're listening to their opinions on the timing of these bond issuances.
Might you increase the amount? And what are some of the considerations?
So far, there are no plans of increasing the amount right now. We have healthy gross international reserves. We have something like $107 billion in gross international reserves. We have a thriving BPO industry. We generate something like $35 billion in revenues. We have a robust OFW remittances. Tourism did well in the Philippines last year. People going to the 7 million tourists in the Philippines last year, but spending twice the average amount. So we've been able to generate something like $12 billion last year from tourism receipts.
You talked about remittances. Would a weaker currency help those remittances, which
Yes,
is
in the
crucial
Philippines,
for the
Correct.
GDP?
Now, normally in the Philippines, when the peso depreciates, there's more remittances because and more purchasing power also for 10 million Filipino families in the 10 million Filipino families. Their relatives remit more, and they can spend more in pesos.
Given that you're quite comfortable with the liquidity in the country, are there tax measures you'd like to implement in 2025?
Yes.
Or is that not necessary?
We do have a few revenue measures in Congress right now. We expect to pass them before the end of the year. Maybe during the lame duck session, May to June, after the elections. It's also preparing for higher interest rates, just in case, so that we have additional revenues.
Higher rates just in case because of a Fed that is higher for longer?
That's correct. That's correct. So we're preparing for that as well. But last year, we had the highest revenue to GDP effort in the last 27 years. We hit our targets. Actually, we surpassed our revenue targets. We are on track with regard to our macro fiscal situation targets as well between now until 2028. So I think we're doing okay.
So with the measures that you're intending to pass, how much more revenue will that generate?
Roughly about 300 billion additional, just in one revenue measure. About 300 billion the next 4 years. And that would give us the ability to reduce even our deficit even further.
I also like to touch on cryptocurrencies.
Yes.
With the Trump administration, regulations will likely be pro-crypto.
Yes.
What implications do you think that could have globally?
Yes. Globally, in the Philippines, about a lot of Filipinos have already invested in crypto. Something like 6 trillion pesos worth of investments in crypto is being done because we have a young population. Philippines, the average age is about 25 years old, and they're interested in crypto. And they're English speaking, right? So, yeah, about 6 trillion pesos have already been invested in crypto in the Philippines.
Are you concerned that you could see more investments?
I expect more, especially with digital connectivity. We have a company called GCash as well. 90 million Filipinos have an e-wallet. And there they can save money, they can invest money, and many of them are going to crypto as well, as I mentioned earlier.
Is there reason for the government to be concerned? Because we've seen huge volatility in the
Yes.
cryptocurrency space.
Yes.
And how are you looking at regulations?
Yes, that's something we have to look into yet. No? But most of these cryptos, I think that they're being invested in are regulated in the United States right now, right? So we're ensuring that we follow those regulations too.